So this story is about Bob. Bob had been fiddling with computers since he was a kid, and he knows them pretty well. As with most IT people, he moved from job to job. He worked for a service and distribution company that only had 2 IT employees. The company was located in Ontario, Canada. About 3 years ago, Bob's employer decided to modernize their software. They had separate programs for dispatching, inventory, payroll, and finances, so it was complicated moving information from one program to the other. They decided to get an ERP program that could handle this, and Bob recommended one that he knew inside out from a previous employer. For those who don't know, an ERP program handles everything. Purchase orders, sales, inventory, personnel, vendors, customers, all of it. For example, you could run a report and find out which customer had bought the most of part X in the last year, which salesman has improved his numbers the most, which vendor has the fastest delivery time, which shipper packed the most orders, etc. Everyone in the company used this ERP program, but it was very complicated, so everyone only used the aspects of the program that were relevant to their position. For example, inventory guys would only interact with the part of the program that involved the inventory. They never cared what the price was or who the vendor was, they just did inventory stuff. Bob was run ragged during the implementation process, but he still managed to train most of the employees on the parts of the program that were only relevant to them. After a few months, everything was running fairly smoothly. Then the company decided to expand their footprint and was marketing into different time zones. That messed things up. Atlantic Canada is 90 minutes early, so if someone sent an email or an order at 8 a.m. their time, it would arrive at 6:30 a.m. Ontario time. Pacific Canada is 3 hours late, so an email sent at 3 p.m. Vancouver time would arrive to us at 6 p.m. This stretched out the day, so many staff had to now come in early and work late. Bob would arrive at 8 a.m., and there would immediately be people demanding his assistance, and were annoyed that he didn't respond instantly, even though their request was submitted before he even showed up to work. The same thing would happen after he left work for the day. His phone would ring at dinner time with people that wanted help right now. So the company decided to stagger the work times of Bob and his other colleague. Bob's colleague had kids and refused to take the shift change. The employer insisted, so the colleague quit. That meant that Bob was the only person in the IT department. The employer said they would hire a new IT guy, but they had trouble finding one who knew the ERP system, and they were offering well under a market value salary. Bob asked for a raise and was denied. Then Bob asked for overtime, and the employer told him that as an IT specialist, he was exempt from overtime laws in Ontario. Bob looked it up, and the employer was correct. This continued for some time. Bob knew that his company was underpaying him, and that they would have a lot of trouble finding another technician. Things went downhill from there. Bob would get chewed out if he missed a call or an email, no matter what time it came in. He had to train new hires in the ERP system, as well as take care of the hardware. He asked repeatedly for better compensation, and was denied, so he planned to get a new job. Now, here's the revenge. Bob had access to the entirety of the ERP program. Whenever a user signed in, the time was logged, and even if they didn't sign out, after 15 minutes it would log them out anyway. Everyone in the company was on salary, and many of them came in early and stayed late. Ontario labor law states that even salaried workers are entitled to overtime after 44 hours a week, unless they were managers or supervisors. So, Bob jumped into the program and ran a report for each employee who wasn't a manager, all the way back to when the ERP program was started. Then, he reached out to an employment lawyer and got the okay to refer employees to him. Bob lined up another job, and after he left, every employee in the company got an email with an Excel sheet showing the hours they'd put in past 44 hours a week. The subject line was, "You are legally entitled to overtime pay." In the body of the email was the lawyer's name. Then, shit hit the fan. Almost every employee at the company authorized the lawyer to negotiate with the company on their behalf, and the company had to pay a ton of money. All the company had to do was pay Bob for the extra work that he put in. Instead, they had to pay for almost everyone. I was in the Navy and stationed on a submarine base in Connecticut. I had a friend, Bill, that I met in boot camp, and we were in the same class for our Navy job training. Now, Bill wasn't the most physically fit guy. He was short, kinda chubby, and wore glasses. However, Bill was really smart, and as a sonar technician, he was supposed to be smart. He had a pragmatic way of looking at things that I really valued in a friend, and I know that it would have made him successful if he had made it out to the fleet. While we were in school, we had a couple of petty officers who were hard asses. They somehow convinced themselves that they were super soldiers, despite the fact that our jobs in that field were really nerd-centric. You get picked for that job because of your math and computer skills, not your deadlift number. Still, they were both all about being fit and working out all the time. We would do physical training 3 times a week, and while most of us could keep up, Bill often fell behind on runs, or didn't quite meet what these 2 idiots believed to be the standard. To be clear, Bill did pass the minimum requirements for fitness. He just didn't go as extreme as these guys. As a side note for the other Navy vets, he got an MCPON coin for how hard he pushed himself at physical training the day that he visited. The end result is that these petty officers would constantly berate and belittle Bill. They'd call him fat, lazy, and everything else. They would tell him that he should kill himself, you name it. They were always on him despite him passing his assessments. At some point, Bill pushed himself too hard and injured his knee. He told these petty officers that he was injured and he had been seen by a doctor on base. The doctor had put him on light duty so that his knee could recover. He had the paperwork to back it up. They elected to ignore that and threatened to kick him out if he didn't do the workouts. So, Bill kept pushing himself, injuring himself more, and his mental health degraded the whole time. During my time in the Navy, you didn't really get mental health services. The only person to talk to like that was the chaplain. For those who don't know, the chaplain is a religious leader, usually a pastor/priest/rabbi that is signed up as a commissioned officer. Our chaplain was the sweetest little woman you've ever met, but as a chaplain, she held the rank of captain, which is a high-ranking officer. So Bill set up a meeting with the chaplain to talk about things. When Bill told the petty officers that he'd be missing class the next day for his chaplain meetings, they yelled at and berated him more. They called him a pussy, useless, not fit for the Navy, and everything else you can imagine. They convinced Bill that he was being weak, and the chaplain wouldn't care about his issues, that nobody would care. They promised to make life even harder if he didn't show up the next day, so he canceled his meeting. Evidently, bad luck hit, and that night his girlfriend was also breaking it off with him. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to a call from Bill. I couldn't hear anything, so I had to ask several times, "Bill, are you there? Are you okay?" Eventually, I decided that this was just a butt dial, so I hung up and went to bed. I still regret that decision. The next day, all hell broke loose. Me and a couple of my other friends got calls from Bill's now ex-girlfriend telling us that he was in the hospital because he cut his own throat. It turns out that when me and a couple other people got that call at 3 a.m., Bill couldn't speak at the time and was kind of out of it due to blood loss. Me and the other guys finished what we had to do on base and rushed over to the hospital. As we got there, the chaplain was on her way out and we passed her in the hallway. She spoke to us briefly to say that Bill would be okay, and she wouldn't forget this. I had never seen a look on someone's face that so accurately depicted raw, unfiltered rage. It took us all by surprise because she was such a small, sweet, and personable lady. But the look in her eyes, you could tell she wanted someone to pay for this. She wanted revenge, and we all knew that she had the kind of rank that she could get it done. We visited Bill, who could barely talk, but he told us a story of what had happened, what he was thinking at the time, and how he was glad that it didn't work. Apparently, it was cold enough that the blood clotted on the outside of his neck and made a kind of patch that kept him long enough for the emergency medical services to find him and get him to the hospital. The doctor said that he missed his carotid artery by about 1 millimeter. A week went by and we hadn't heard anything until we got called in by the chief of the training command, the boss of those petty officers. He said that he wanted to check in on the rest of us and make sure that there weren't any other issues with these guys that he wasn't aware of and that we were all okay. I told this guy about an ass chewing that one of these petty officers gave me a few months back. That these guys really set me up to fail and that they had been lying to him. My friend cited a couple other examples of these petty officers being awful, dishonest people. I don't think that our testimony really mattered. I think the fates of these petty officers were already sealed, and we were being asked for more ammo to bury them with. The next day, these petty officers were nowhere to be found, and we were introduced to new instructors who would be taking over our training permanently. After class, I decided to stop by and ask the chaplain what happened. She told me that she had never been more disgusted by the actions of a sailor than these two guys who convinced someone not to come see her. She teared up a bit, regretting that she didn't get the chance to help Bill before he made his attempt. In her mind, these two guys caused Bill's attempt. So, on to the revenge. The chaplain told me that she went to the admiral in charge of the entire base and demanded their immediate discharge. He granted it. Both petty officers were immediately processed out with dishonorable discharges. I can't remember the exact charge I heard they were cited for, but I know the Navy has a way of selling BS on paper when they want a certain outcome, especially with officers at that high level. So basically, these petty officers get no veteran benefits of any kind. They get kicked out of the base housing they lived in, and they could probably only find work at like a gas station or under the table stuff somewhere. Also, I know from someone else who got the boot that the Navy only pays for a single bus ticket to get you back home. They don't pay to transport any of your family who's also staying on base or to transport any of your belongings. When you have a discharge like that, no company with Department of Defense contracts is allowed to hire you. That includes McDonald's because they have stores on bases throughout the country. That also includes Taco Bell, Subway, etc. None of them will give you a job. They can't, but even if they could, they wouldn't want to anyways. So I don't know where these guys went or what became of them, but I know their lives were irrevocably ruined. One of them had been with the Navy for about 18 years, so he was 2 years from retirement and lost everything. The other was about 12 years in, so he also lost a lot. Wherever they are now, I'd be surprised to hear they're making more than minimum wage. As for Bill, well, he made a full recovery and got a full medical discharge, which is an honorable discharge that meant E5 pay for the rest of his life, full benefits, and a referral to a counselor in his home state once he got back there, all paid for by the Navy. We lost touch over the years, but I did see on Facebook that he got himself together, became a police officer, and got married. Out of curiosity, I looked up E5 pay, and if you have under 2 years of experience, then that comes out to about $34K a year, but if you have over 4 years experience, then that comes out to $40K a year. So it's not a fortune, but it is enough to retire off of indefinitely. The year is 1989. I'm in basic training at Fort Benning, which is now Fort Moore. Sundays, as all military personnel know, were the only days we had to somewhat recover from physical training. We had an E5 drill sergeant who was a football coach at home. He thought that it would be fun to make us work out on our Sunday recovery day. In Georgia, in 90-degree weather and humid out. There were no other NCOs around, and we had no access to water. Needless to say, things started going very badly. Guys started passing out left and right. Then, during one drill, a guy's leg fell into a hole and he fractured it. He should have seen the emergency response to the parade field. There were ambulances everywhere carting guys off to the hospital. Medics were brought in from active duty units to run IVs to hydrate us. Our platoon size was over 50, so we're not talking just a few medical personnel either. The next morning, that drill sergeant was let off the company grounds. He was also in handcuffs. Apparently, he had broken all kinds of safety rules. I live in Turkey, and as you may know, southeast of my country was wrecked by a couple of giant earthquakes a year ago. My city was the epicenter, and while the house that I lived in with my family wasn't destroyed, a lot of shelves got knocked off, and one of them was the one where I had my Gundam kits. Out of all the Gundam models that I had, only one survived, one that was heavily customized. I had built it with my grandfather who passed away a few years ago, so I was ecstatic that it survived. A few months after everything had calmed down, my mother called her relatives over for dinner, which included Aunt B. She brought along her 8-year-old son, who's an entitled brat. While the adults were drinking coffee, this little brat barged into my room and demanded to play with my computer, which I refused since I was editing a video for my college society and I had the camera on. Well, the brat went crying to his mother, who came in and started yelling at me. While I was dealing with the mom, her little brat climbed onto my desk and took my model kit, then immediately dropped it and stomped on it. Then we just devolved into yelling, me swearing them up and down and telling them they were going to pay for it, and her calling me a weirdo for still having toys and that she wasn't going to pay for anything. At first, my mother didn't want to make my aunt pay just to keep the peace. But when she realized that it was the kit that I made with my late grandfather, her father, she was angrier than I was and went for blood. We took the case to a friend of ours who's a lawyer who specializes with in-family cases, and they told us that since my camera caught the whole thing, we would definitely win. But it would be better to come to an agreement out of court because a settlement would be cheaper for everyone. I pulled together a price list of the kit that I needed to create an exact replica of the one that was destroyed, and it came out to $1,000 US, which in our local currency translates to about 25,000 turkey dollars. Well, my aunt refused the settlement offer, so we took her to court. She pulled all kinds of BS to not pay and to delay, but the judge ended up making her pay $1,650 US, plus an order for her to pay any border taxes on the replacement kits, alongside the court and lawyer fees. This completely destroyed her savings, and her husband, who was already waiting for a chance to divorce her, took it. By the time it was over, she had nothing, and even lost her brat's custody to her ex-husband. And she not only lost the down payment that she had for a house, she lost all of her savings and didn't get alimony from her husband. Am I happy that her life got completely destroyed? No, not really. Do I feel sorry that it happened? Not in the slightest. She and her crotch goblin messed around and found out. It's that simple. I do feel bad for her husband, though. He's going to be the one trying to turn that brat into a normal person, and I don't envy him in the slightest.